Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it. Rabbi Hajioff, thank you so much for joining us today. You are a speaker and you are a dean at Yeshiva University, right? And
not a dean. I'm a professor. I don't.
Professor, I love that. And you've written two books. The third one is coming out. Will Jew marry me? Jew have questions. Are you working Jew into the new topic of your book, or?
I actually wanted to. The first book was Jew got questions, and the second one was Will Jew marry me? The third book, the topic is Mashiach, the Messiah, and the end of days. Okay. So I actually wanted to go with the title Jewpocalypse. However, my publisher was like, nah, too much, Dayenu. You've gone too far already. So instead, the title of the new book, which will be out in a few weeks, is The Future, the Jewish Messiah, Israel, and the End of Days.
Amazing. And before we get into that topic specifically, can you give me a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are writing and promoting and teaching?
So I grew up in London, England, as you can tell from the accent. It isn't New Jersey. And I grew up a traditional Jewish kid. I went to yeshiva growing up. I wasn't particularly great in my yeshiva studies, unfortunately. I was in my secular studies, although I did spend a year in Israel studying. After which I went to University of Manchester. I studied political science, and I thought I'd be working in journalism and media, which I did for about a couple of years. I worked for MTV, among other news organizations. At that point, I decided that I wanted to pursue Jewish learning. I met a...
What made you make that assessment or desire?
It took time. I wasn't like, hand didn't come out of the heavens and like pick me up, nothing crazy like that. I met certain teachers and rabbis in my early 20s who had a profound effect upon me. I go to classes, programs, trips, it was like Israel, free trips and stuff like that. I was like a trip, junkie, especially the free ones. So I used to go on a lot of programs, and eventually I realized this was something I wanted to do. And I spoke to a lot of people, and so I went back to study after working for a few years in Israel and then here in New York. So I didn't finish my rabbinical studies till I was 30 years old. And that's when I started to work in the world of Jewish education. One of my first jobs was working for a place called the Jewish Enrichment Center, JEC, in Manhattan. And that was just me and another rabbi. And that eventually grew much bigger and collaborated with Birthright Israel. So I was actually the official rabbi of Birthright Israel, New York, for nearly 15 years. And at the same time, I got an adjunct position at Stone College, Yeshiva University, and that grew. And now I'm full-time faculty for the past 13 years, and I teach 4 courses a semester. I have 140 students every semester. So what I did was eventually I realized there was a lot of information in the courses, and my students were like, put this into a book. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. Like, no, just try, put it into a book. So I sat down and I spoke to a few friends and people who had written books. I'm not a great writer. I'm really not. I'm not being humble. I'm just not. I have great editors. But I eventually just put everything down into print, and I wrote and wrote and wrote. And that's actually the secret to writing. I've learned, now I'm on my 3rd book, I finally realized that it's just to sit and write, which sounds a little bit, obvious. But the thing to do, and people I get a lot of calls from people who see the books and say, how should I do it? And, how I'm going to get sponsorship, and what I'm going to do. What's the title going to be? I'm going to forget everything. Just sit down and write, and eventually you'll paste together, and it'll become a book, which is what happens. So that's really what it was. It was basically information that was based upon the courses I teach. Working with young professionals, Birthright alumni specifically, I get a lot of questions. A lot of them very interesting, a lot of them very challenging. So I just kind of like crunch them all into one book of questions and answers. That was basically the process. Plus, I deal a lot with couples who are dating, getting married. I've performed nearly 150 weddings over the past 15 years. I have another few coming up over the next few weeks. Many of them have met on trips that I've led. I've led nearly 30 trips to Israel, Poland, Prague, Italy. One trip I led, actually, we had 5 couples meet and get married. So close to them.
You get a bonus for that?
I've heard a lot of stories. Eventually, I just put that down. That became the second book on, dating, relationships, and marriage, and all the challenges. Because I don't know what's like where you are on your side of the country. Besides the fact it's much warmer. In New York, most people who are dating are miserable. So I wanted to create some kind of guide to help people through that process. That was really what it was all about.
That's beautiful. One of the things that I'm so fascinated by, before we get into the actual content of what you write, is the career track of rabbis and or people that are kind of out and working with Jewish people nowadays. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do, or did your career sort of function like your books, which is you just kind of got out and just kept working and things built as they went?
That's a great question, Jacob. For me, it was a little different. It was a later life decision. It wasn't until I was in my, mid to late 20s, I decided this was going to be my career choice. I specifically, however, went in knowing that I wanted to work with young professionals, college age and young professionals in Jewish outreach, working with people who didn't have much Jewish background, which going back 15 years ago it was happening in the Jewish world, targeting that population I'm talking about. There was Chabad, they were out there, and there were some outreach organizations that were doing stuff, but in Manhattan, there was pretty much nothing at all. We were pretty revolutionary. So I went into my studies knowing full well this was what I was going to do. I knew I didn't want to be a pulpit rabbi, although, I've been offered and been tempted over the past, but that's a whole different thing, or working in kashrut, working in kosher, or anything else in the, rabbinical world. I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was just, thank God, I was very lucky enough, had much mazal. I was able to make a long-term living out of it. There's a number of people who started that. They had to go into pulpit to, pay their salaries, make a living and do other things, which is fine. I just don't think I'll make a very good pulpit rabbi. So I just kind of stayed on this track, and I just managed to keep it going. I guess I'm very fortunate, very grateful for that.
And God willing, it'll go for many, many more years. One of the concepts is that there's not such a clear, I think it's a little bit hard to model the kind of career that you have, that I have, and that I think a lot of people have and want to have, of kind of developing their skill sets and helping people where they are. Is there certain advice, or I guess you could say like hizuk or strengthening that you have to give yourself as you kind of walk along a very unclear career world that's not, that like 9 to 5, then you retire, which I don't think exists pretty much anymore?
I thought about that a lot, and I get a lot of calls from rabbis. Actually, just got one yesterday from a rabbi who's a rabbi in the Hamptons who had similar questions. What I found is there's 3 areas of Jewish professional life. You've got to be good in one of these 3. Hopefully all 3, if not 2 of them. And if you're going to be good at one of them, you better be really, really good at it. And that is number 1, administration. There's some people in the Jewish world who are just very good administrators, putting things together, working programs, kind of the CEO type. The other is a fundraiser, just very good at raising funds. And the third one is education. I'm not a great administrator. I'm an okay fundraiser. I'm not great, which is something I wish I was better at, and I'm still striving to become better at. And the third one is education, which, thank God I've managed to build up a good repertoire, which I'm very grateful for, which I'm good at. So really you're focusing on those 3. And ideally I tell people become good at all 3, or at least be a good delegator. But fundraising is the most important. Can't lie. If you want to stay in this long term, and I wish I would have started fundraising earlier. I got lazy at certain points because, when I started working with Birthright, my salary was taken care of, and I got involved with education, which was great and was very, very successful and blew up, in a good way. However, the fundraising is, he or she who fundraises gets to make the decisions. So if there's any area I would say in terms of loving what you do and all the rest of the stuff, which is obvious, fundraising is really, you got to put on your hit list of things you got to be good at, for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. So a couple of questions here. We live in almost like a storybook world where you're reading the headlines and it's as exciting as a fiction book until you realize that sort of everyone's life is on the line. What's going on? There's this, Messiah and Israel, and I don't know if Donald Trump plays into that or not, but what are you telling people, and what should people be thinking about as they sort of live through this epic of history and this concept that perhaps the history will not go on forever?
I'm so pleased you asked me that, Jacob, because that happens to be the topic of my 3rd book, quite interestingly. Donald Trump has nothing to do with this book. This is not a sensationalized book. The first two books were light and easy reading and full of jokes, which I think were very funny. This one is definitely a more serious book. And we're not looking per se at, well, we're actually looking at some current events, not any specific political leaders per se. We're looking at movements in the book, but it's a very much a traditional book looking at Jewish sources to see what they say about the end of days. There's a lot written in the Christian world. There's a whole rapture field, which I became, very well learned in. And there's the Muslim idea, which we're seeing the coming of the Mahdi, and the Christians obviously have the second coming. And I want to say for the Jews, because I found that most Jewish people I spoke to, specifically the religious ones, have absolutely no idea, right? Well, the idea of the Mashiach, what it's all about, why, when, where, and there's so much written on it. Most people think it's just like a fringe topic or something only the Lubavitch Hasidim are interested in, and that's just not true. There's a lot written on it, Torah commentaries, all of scriptures is focused on this. So I really wanted to make an easy guide, if you will, for the end of days. Talks about Mashiach, qualifications, how do we know he is the Mashiach, parts of his personality, what his mission is. And then once you're in that realm, you can't help but fall into the realm of Israel, because that's where all the attention is going to focus. And there's no doubt a big part of the book is actually, I don't use the word proof, but as verification, if you will, of what we're seeing today are signs of the, what I believe the imminent arrival of the Mashiach and what that means. So actually, the end of days, I call it that because it's a catchphrase, but it's really, it's the days to come. It's not the end of days. Actually, it's a good thing. And we're not going to end anything per se, except wars and struggle. According to Maimonides, the Rambam, the only real difference between Olam Hazeh, this world, and the world to come, the days to come, is that there'll be no more war, no strife, based upon the prophet Isaiah and others, and things are going to be great. So when we look out at the world and everything's very gloomy and challenging and difficult, there's good news and good things are coming. For example, if I just pick one example, one thing we see that's very big in Israel is agriculture. And we look back 100 years ago, and Israel was not agriculturally, viable, exciting, things happening. If you look at the writings of people who visited the land of Israel 100 years ago, like Mark Twain, for example, who I quote in the book, Israel was a dust bowl. And now we've seen this incredible, rejuvenation of the agricultural world. And that happens to be spoken about a lot among the prophets in detail. They even talk about the actual type of trees they're going to grow and where they're going to grow. And that's actually seen as a portent, as a sign that Mashiach, the Messiah, is going to come, laying the land, literally in this case, ready for the ultimate revival of the Jewish people in Israel and the coming of the Messiah. So it's not negative, it's positive stuff. And we're seeing many such signs. Some of the signs aren't great, but that happens to be, I'll give an example of one of the positive signs we're seeing. So I bring down the words of the prophets and the commentaries and what's happening in the world today, specifically Israel and Jerusalem.
Amazing. So two questions on that. First of all, why do you think that the mainstream Orthodox world is so removed from this topic? Why are Jews in general thinking that, the good days in heaven, all that kind of stuff are not part of, Jewish, that somehow Christians and Muslims both sort of modeled everything from us, but just kind of made that part up and they happen to be very similar?
That's good. Jacob, you hit a golden nugget over there. And I've thought and spoken to a lot of people about this. I'm not sure is the short answer. One reason is that there seems to be, I think there's a fear to discuss these things. There shouldn't be. Maimonides, the Rambam, lists 13 principles of Jewish faith. And these 13 principles are considered by the Jews worldwide to be if you believe these, you're in. If you don't believe any of these, you're out. And they include such, nuggets of Jewish philosophy that, the prophet of Moses is the most important prophecy. You have to believe the words of the prophets. The Torah is true. Reward and punishment for our deeds. All the classics, I would have thought. And you get to number 12, and you have to believe the coming of the Messiah. It's number 13, resurrection of the dead. So it's definitely part of mainstream Jewish thought. It's not some weird, mystical fringe theory which we've grabbed upon. However, it's not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses. It's hinted at, and it's referenced at, and the Talmud picks apart many of the verses to say, It's talking about Mashiach, and it's talking about Jacob's talks to his sons about Mashiach and the eventual redemption of the Jewish people. The rest of Scripture is full of it. So that may be one reason that it's not explicit. And why it's not explicit, I mentioned in the book as to why it was left explicitly. Short answer is the Torah, the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, talk specifically about this world, right? What our job is. That's why the word Hayom is mentioned, in a very big way. The other religions, however, are based upon this end to the eschatology, which is a fancy way of saying it of days. It's based upon that. All Christianity is based upon the Jewish idea of the Messiah, thinking they found the Messiah, which they haven't. As you read the books, very close. Although I don't discuss any other religion's view of the Messiah, if you just read the scriptures, you see that we're still waiting for the first coming, let alone a second one. So if you look through and actually read it, it becomes very, very clear and apparent that the Torah is obsessed with today, which is why the word Hayom today appears again and again and again. Other religions, they're solely based upon this eschatological reality, which we just aren't really interested. We're interested about today. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it was actually a reaction to that, since the other religions are all about the end of days and the Messiah's second coming, and according to Islam, pushing in order to bring the Mahdi and doing certain things, which I speak about in the book, giving lives up, which we Jews are against, as a way to bring the Messiah early, as it were. So maybe it was a reaction to that. I heard from a great teacher of mine, he said, this topic is one of the topics, it's going to sound a bit weird, was put in the freezer. Right? It wasn't disposed of, heaven forbid, because it's a principle of our thought, and you have to believe in it. But it was put in the freezer, it was put on hold. Maybe after the Holocaust, people were dealing with other things, just trying to recapture the Jewish world, recapture Torah learning, try to build up the Jewish masses after the Holocaust. It could be. But again, look at any Jewish writer, and they're writing extensively. The Abarbanel, the Rambam, right? He talks about it extensively. The laws of Mashiach, if you will, are found in the writings of the Rambam, in the laws of kings, because that's really what Mashiach is. It's going to be a king. So they all write about it. Yet when I hear rabbis talking, they give a talk on the laws of kosher, and they'll be like, and maybe see the Mashiach come at the end. It was like an addendum. Oh, by the way, it's like, well, that's just not enough. I wanted to. So there was this lack, and I wanted to fill the void. So the book was written for, I guess, a more Jewishly educated audience. But then again, I think anyone can enjoy it, and will get hopefully a lot out of it.
Are you seeing that there's a lot of anxiety in the world today? And did you try to calm that anxiety? Would you advocate if a student or a Jewish person comes to you and says, I'm just so stressed out about what's going on in the world today in North Korea and all this kind of stuff? Do you take the lessons of your book and the concepts from our rabbis and say, well, we really don't have to stress out about it so much? Or do you think that that's sort of an appropriate use of theology in politics?
Me, I'm all about stoking anxiety. Any chance I get to just freak people out and to have people run through the streets screaming in panic, that's what I'm, no. I do try to, I don't use the word console, I'm there to educate, but I want to show the people that all the bad things that are happening that we're seeing, I hope I prove in the book, are predicted to some degree. Not to every degree, like some people out there trying to find every nuance that's happening in politics relates to this verse in Isaiah. I think that's a little bit overplayed, overdone. There's people who find, the codes and stuff. There's none of that in the book at all. It's pretty much a rational book in that sense, looking through Jewish sources as opposed to, fringe elements. Having said that, we're seeing a lot of turmoil. We're seeing a lot of threats. People are freaking out. I mean, you saw what happened in Hawaii. One little signal went out that's, a bomb could be coming, and the whole city freaked out, which I don't blame them for. I'd pretty much be the same, although that's pretty much I wouldn't say a daily occurrence, but a regular occurrence in Israel. They're just used to it, So a part of the book is looking at things we're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism, in terms of, definitely hatred of the Jewish people, seeing a rise in the Muslim world, and putting that into context. I'm putting it into context and saying that this has been spoken about, it's happening for a reason, and the rise of the Muslim world is part of that. The growth in atheism we're seeing is actually spoken about directly by the prophet Daniel, and the Rambam addresses it and says we're going to see this large movement of atheism sweep across the world, there'll be small pockets that will hold on to a true belief in God. Even among the Jewish people, specifically, we're going to see pockets of different groups. They're going to fan out towards the end of days, and it's going to be hard to know who's got the truth. And the Rambam talks about that. But this is nothing so new. The Jews in Yemen, a number of hundreds of years ago, about 1,000 years ago, had their own troubles when it came to a lot of persecution and challenges. And they wrote to the Rambam Maimonides. And he became, to this day, he still is, I don't want to say the guru, but the chief rabbi of the Yemenite Jews. So Yemenite Jews, like, they extol the Rambam as, oh, Rambam HaKadosh, the holy Rambam. And the reason is because he wrote a lot of letters to them, which you can see in Hebrew and English, and I quoted a lot of that in the book, calming them down and describing what's happening to them as being a prelude towards the end of days, including the atheism thing and the reaction to Islam that they were dealing with in their days, and false messiahs. So it's nothing new per se. I'm not creating anything new. I'm just gathering information that existed before and like crunching it together. If people read the book and become consoled that things aren't getting worse, they are actually getting better. We're climbing a mountain, Jacob, climbing a mountain, and it's difficult and it's challenging, but there is a top to the mountain, there is a peak, and we're getting there. I think we're closer than most people realize to that, but things are getting better. And we as Jewish people, although we've been through more than any other nation in the world, been through more pogroms, Holocaust, exiles, and crusades, we always are optimistic, and that's just because like we're crazy, right? Like, hey, let's just be happy. The answer is because we're getting to a place where things are going to get better, and that's really the main lesson of the Torah and our prophets, that things are bad now, but they will be better, and we're getting to and going to a better place.
How would you respond to the skeptic that says either one of two things? First of all, that this promotes, I guess you could say the same kind of fear-mongering, if you could, that Christians and Muslims deploy on their audiences. And the second question would be this idea, and you alluded to it, that we can essentially find, examples of everything, and there's all these different kinds of people. How do you address that concern that, no, this is actually really happening, as opposed to we're just trying to kind of, paint the target after we've shot the arrow?
It's a fair question. I'll start with the one word you use, which is skeptical. Skeptical is good. Okay, we as Jews, I speak about in my first book, which is, Jew Got Questions. Skepticism is good, and it's a healthy thing. Cynicism is not good. So cynicism is basically just poo-pooing and say, I'm checking out. Skepticism, I don't know. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to check it out. So reading my book or any book, or hearing any idea, any Torah class, being skeptical is a good and I believe healthy thing. I think that's unfortunately been lost from a lot of the world, definitely the Christian world, and even elements within the Jewish world. They've lost that. They're fearful of people asking questions and being skeptical. So in terms of my book, I would say like anything else, buy it, read it, and be skeptical, and make your own conclusions. Everything is sourced. You can see everything, read everything. And if you can put it together, and if it makes sense, and you're able to, enjoy and get something out of it, then fantastic. Do you have to agree with everything I write? I don't think there's much in life you have to buy in, some things, but not everything you have to buy in 100% in order to enjoy it, in order to get something out of it, Most books I read, I get, 80, 90%. That's pretty good. That's a good day's work if I can get something out of it. So if the concern is being skeptical of what I'm writing about or what anyone's writing about, fantastic. Be skeptical. It's healthy. And it should be a catalyst for more questions and more learning, which is why it's unlike the first two books, is a lot more heavily sourced. I give people the opportunity who are interested to go into the Torah sources to see what I've written and make their own conclusions. So I like skepticism.
Great. Two final questions. Question number one is, what inspires you in terms of your own reading and your own learning, or if there's a particular mentor or rabbi that you follow that kind of keeps you fired up?
Thank you for that question. What inspires me? Tennis. Play a lot of that. That inspires me. I don't want to give too much of a cliche answer, but I'll give you the honest answer. funny. I was actually speaking in New Jersey last night, and it was a smallish group. There were like maybe 30 people, 20, 30 people. And we had interesting people in the crowd. I had a doctor, obviously, it was a Jewish group, and lawyers and finance people. And there was a guy that I said, so what do you do? Because, I get to know people a little bit when I speak. I don't just present and check in, check out. And he says, I'm a puppeteer. I go, wow, I think I haven't met a Jewish puppeteer before. We got into conversation. And it's going to sound very strange. I was actually inspired by what he told me. He uses it as a teaching methodology and related to people. So that just sprung to my head, because what inspires me are people who are inspired. And it doesn't really matter what you do, to be honest with you. I find people who you would call probably like boring jobs, who are very inspired, and people who have like amazing, careers and lives and talents, who are uninspired and uninspiring. Funny, when I went to work for my this past job I had, someone said to me, what inspires you? And I said, the people around me who work there. If they're inspired, I'm inspired. I don't really care what they do, where they're from. If they're inspired people, it's contagious. So I tell people, whatever you do, be inspired about it. If you're a doctor, lawyer, garbage collector, Indian chief, I don't really care. Be inspired about it, and that's contagious. So that's something which I try to live by. And if I find a book inspiring, I read it. If I don't, I put it down. And if I see something online which I find inspiring, I try to share it with other people, and I try to build up inspiration. So my social media, which I'm quite invested in, I try to always feed with inspirational messages and thoughts and ideas and videos, and be inspired about it. So no matter what I teach, I'm hoping, from the laws of Shabbat, which I teach a course in, which people say, well, ain't so, inspiring, learning how to, details of Shabbat, what you cannot touch. But I find it interesting. I'm inspired. And some students say to me, out of all the other classes I give, they enjoy that the most, because I don't know, I'm inspired by it. So inspiration is contagious. And if you're inspired by it, others will be. And if you're not, they won't.
And so to clarify what you're saying is that it's the real inspiration has to spring from the internal, that you have to generate your own inspiration and then feed off of other people, as opposed to I'm hanging out with person X and that's going to somehow like rub off on me. I have to be generating it from the inside. Or you're saying that's what you try to do.
And once you're not inspired anymore, in your career, for example, you got to make a change.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people are just on this cycle of just like, I'm doing it because I'm doing it. And we've all been there. I mean, I've been there too. And they're just doing it because they're doing it. And then you got to make some change, whether internally or socially, or something's got to change. I'm not saying that your career should be exciting all the time. It's okay to coast. I have many people I deal with who are coasting through their careers because they're focusing on their dating and relationships, and that's okay, right? You don't have to walk into work every day like woohoo, unless you're dealing in meth. You're not going to be completely like freaking out every single day, whatever you're dealing with, Jacob. But there should be a certain amount of like, I'm generally speaking, I'm inspired by this. I may have a week off, 2 weeks off, a month where I'm, working through something, but there should be a general inspiration that keeps us going. And that comes from people, not the job. People have to be inspired. What they do is really secondary, if not tertiary, to be honest.
Fantastic. And final question from your 30,000 foot view, and having spent 2+ decades in Jewish education and outreach in the Jewish world, and have talked and traveled and done all these things, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge that's facing the Jewish people right now? And how do you go about your area of trying to address that?
I'll answer that with an unusual short anecdote. I got a call, this is unusual for me, I know people in the Jewish get this, from a Hasidic rabbi in Borough Park, Brooklyn, New York, 2 weeks ago. And he said, with a very thick, heavy Yiddish accent, which I only caught every second word, come speak to my people, come speak to my community. I said, I don't really speak to Hasidim. I deal, with young professionals. I teach college, but I'm not really, he goes, no, you come, you bring, you give them kiruv, you come, you inspire. I said, I'm not sure. He goes, come. So I said, fine, I said to my wife, she's like, just go, and just see what's going on. There were 300 people there. 300 turned up, and I'm not known in the Hasidic world, what I'm saying? And I spoke for an hour and a half. And I realized, talking to them afterwards and, dealing with them, that they're like everyone else, They're regular people, regular lives, and we see them as, Hasidim, and, it's difficult to relate to, the whole garb and stuff, but like everyone else. And we're all dealing with the same thing, all Jews and really all people, trying to get through life, being inspired, hopefully connecting to God, which is what we, rabbis and everyone should be trying to, instill in people, including ourselves. It's a constant struggle. Everyone's dealing with it. Lack of inspiration, lack of knowledge. I mean, that particular community has their own challenges, which I try to get into. It happens to be dating and relationships and marriage is not one of the problems. A divorce actually is, but getting married is not. And secondly, well, there's other things. Lack of awareness. People are just not aware of their great potential. That's really, if you got to boil it down after everything is said and done, people just are not living fulfilling lives, knowing their true potential. I guess it sounds cliched, but if I could crunch everything I said down to one point, if we understood who we were and our personal mission in this world, our community potential, the Jewish people's and eventually the world's potential, and how God wants us to succeed and exceed in what we're doing, I think a lot of things would change. So self-awareness, I would say, is probably a big. I mean, a lot comes out from that. Marriage, relationships, a career. I mean, it all stems from that. But unless you really work on yourself and understand how amazing you are, which we all struggle with today, especially in the world we're living in with social media, where it's all about the other, not about ourselves. I would say that's it. And a lack of good restaurants. That's something else.
It's funny you said that in New York, because I live in San Diego. There's not really any restaurants, but okay.
Many restaurants. I said good restaurants.
I hear you. So you would say that the biggest challenge is to really embrace that sense of our potential, who we are, which again is probably one of the things that would happen in the Messianic era as well. So to tie it all back very nicely, please tell our viewers and everyone that's watching how we can find out more about you and your upcoming projects and everything that's Rabbi Hajioff.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. A shameless plug. It's about to begin. Check out my website, rabbilawrence.com. Has a number of my classes, and you can purchase my books on Amazon as well. Type in Hajioff. I'm the only Hajioff online that's actually selling books, so you should be okay with that. In addition, the new book will be out soon, so please look out for that. They'll be out in a few weeks, God willing. It's actually being printed right now in Israel. It's cheaper to print out there. That's particularly why. Being imported. I have a YouTube channel, also Lawrence Hajioff. I have maybe nearly 1,000 different classes on all areas of Jewish life, from Jewish holidays to laws of kosher, everything to do with Shabbat, mysticism, you name it. It's all there, so you could go check that out. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a Rabbi Lawrence Hajioff page on Facebook. You can definitely follow me there. I have nearly 3,500 followers, so that's wonderful. And I Facebook Live a lot of my classes and programs as well. So please, search me. I'm probably the most contactable rabbi in the entire world. There's no excuse not to be involved somehow with me, my books, writings, or whatever.
Amazing. Rabbi, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jacob. Good luck.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.